able to speak.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So this is just so they can go to the platform. Oh, the mayor.
Okay.
I'll step out for just a second.
Okay, I think
Hello, this is Kim Young.
the mayor's calling cameo, so I was trying to.
Don't touch anything, Bob.
There's Jody's getting on. She's on audio anyway. I'm not. I got it's hands free.
Hello, Todd.
Hey, what do you say? Where you been?
Okay.
I haven't been able to get past that photo of Dr. Flannery.
Hey, that's a mild one. You ought to say something.
That picture was taken 2 weeks before I became superintendent.
Yeah.
I need to turn that camera on here.
You, Dr. Bill, you got a lot of hair back then, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It changed colors, too.
Not sure. Are you all hearing the repeat of this stuff, or is that just me?
Sounds good on my end.
Good audio.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
have
you
an
guys
echo.
got something here.
I think the mayor's trying to get on.
The mayor is on, isn't he?
Okay, good. Hey, Jody.
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Hello.
Why does it keep repeating that?
We have to.
I'm talking about Chuck. Sorry, wrong mayor.
Are we finished?
Which one do you think we need the most? Or just wait and happen?
Here he is.
That was from today.
Yeah.
The,
Are you ready?
the agenda. Yeah.
All right.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello,
Good to see
Mayor.
everybody.
There's Todd.
Hello, Mayor.
Do we have any, are we missing anybody?
We have 15 participants right now.
Okay. That should be everybody then, because,
Now, Mary Beth and I are on one here.
okay, that's she's the one that we were missing. Okay.
Somewhere on there is the count, classroom count.
Hey, right now, this is sounding pretty good. If we get to where we have a bunch of background noise, sometimes it's good if people mute, and when we have to say something, just kind of raise your hand, you want to say something, and then you can unmute. Bottom, for me, the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there is where I have my mute button on and off. But I'm on a Zoom this morning, and there's a lot of background noise, dogs barking and stuff. So if we have that, we can mute, but otherwise it sounds pretty good right now.
Well, you want to kick it off, Mayor Vest, if you.
Yeah, it looks like everybody's here. Welcome. It's exciting to get this first meeting underway. Good to see Joe there. Appreciate what Joe's done for our county here during this health crisis. So thanks, Joe. And hopefully, going forward, we'll get to where we can meet in person. I think sometimes we can get maybe more accomplished that way. So hopefully that changes here in the next few weeks. But really just welcome everybody. And we're going to cut through here. Bob has done a lot of legwork the last few months, working with the Ken Ross team up there and working with Jim, with our architects and rural development. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's been going on in the background. So really for the last, 3 months, 4 months, there has been a lot going on with this, more than what we see out in public. And we're some of those things we're still working through, especially on Jim's side, working with the federal government and all of those areas. So we'll get that all worked out. But Bob has done a ton of good legwork. He's met with Washington County staff. Dr. Flannery's been available to him. And some of the things I've read have been really impressive. So a lot of the stuff as we go through here, him and Bob and Jay will be, taking part in it. I'll just address something. I know there's a memo on it. One of the great things about having Bob part of this planning team versus being on the committee is that it's going to allow all of you to be able to call him and contact him whenever you have questions or comments you might want to make. If he had been on our committee, because of the sunshine laws and open meetings laws, we couldn't have called him and talked to him individually. It had to be in a meeting setting. So it's going to be much more productive having him sitting on the outside and all of you guys being able to call him. We'll have Glenn Rosenoff, our new town administrator, will be part of this group. He starts Friday, but our next meeting, I'm sure he'll be on there. I'm excited about all you getting to know him. He's really an impressive individual. He's going to work good with our town and work good with Bob. So he'll be on the committee, but you'll have Bob's ear. He'll need to listen to you. I'm sure you can say anything you want to him. He's a book of knowledge. And
Whatever. Anyway, I hope you appreciate my dedication that I had to resign as administrator in order to serve, to function appropriately on this committee. So.
Yeah, I had no doubt. And then we
The
told
fact
Bob
that
how
I'm older
important
than
this is.
Methuselah.
We're glad to have him there. I'll get started on the agenda.
Mayor, one thing that we do need to start out with that Jim has mentioned is, this committee, the way that as I understand it, that we're allowed to meet electronically is really based on the committee making a determination that the electronic means to meet is that there's a determination that is the best and safest way for the committee to meet. So I think there needs to be a vote on that. Is that right, Jim?
That's correct. You're determining that this is an essential function of government, needs to be carried out electronically.
Is that going to be just every meeting, or does that give us that option to do both? You're muted, Jim.
Did you mute yourself, Jim?
I'm sorry, I did. You need to
Okay.
do that at each electronic meeting and only for as long as the governor's order is in place or is extended.
Okay. We'll take a vote on that of just determining that this is an essential government function, holding this electronic meeting for this design committee. If somebody can give me a motion to approve that.
So move.
Got a motion from Philip. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, we'll take, is a voice vote okay, Jim, or do we need a roll call?
The order calls for roll call votes, but on items such as this, and if you take, I think a lot of the county committees have been just taking a voice vote on things like this. Anything you acted on that was like a recommendation on to the board, I would think you'd need a roll call vote.
Okay, well, let's just do a voice vote. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we can move on.
Who seconded the motion?
Philip McLean.
I did.
Okay.
Philip
You-
Philip Plain.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now this the confirmation of our meeting schedule. Bob, you want to talk to that? I know we've got an initial idea, but I'll let you open that up.
If it's okay with the committee, we sort of work through with our staff to try to find the best time for people to participate. And this last Wednesday at 4 p.m., I think we have everybody on the committee now. So if there's not an objection, we'll just stick with that last Wednesday at 4 p.m. if that's okay with you all. And that would be at least on a monthly basis. If the committee decides to meet more often than that, then you would need to make a determination as to when that additional meeting took place.
Has anybody got any issues with last Wednesday, 4 o'clock?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we'll stick with that for now. We'll be flexible.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Bob.
Proceed with that. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is that our current status. I think you might have got an email out from Jay. The team up there at Ken Ross has been working hard on some things. So we're just, basically just getting we're brainstorming, I guess you would say, in many ways. But we'll have Bob and Jay kind of talk a little bit about the architect's contract. If anybody's got any questions about that. So Bob, you want to hit on number 3 there?
Yeah, one of the things that we got 2 issues that we've spent a lot of time on. One of them is the funding from rural development. And we have, because of the nature of this project, it's, sort of breaking new ground in a number of different fields. And so when we go to rural development and we're working through with them, there's, we're having to work through every step on the process because they haven't really done a project like this before. They're 100% in favor of it, but it's just happened to go through a lot of channels. So the good thing that's happened with rural development and the funding issue is that the rural development's interest rate has continued to drop, and currently it's 2.38%, which is a major benefit to the county. Because the project initially was put together on a 3% basis. So the amount of money coming from the county to fund the same thing is likely to hopefully be less, because we still have, as far as the overall project cost, is $32,750,000, and that's fixed as far as the town of Jonesboro is concerned. So if there's any savings in interest rate, that's one that benefits the county, which is certainly we're certainly happy about as well. So we're working through that. We have a couple more steps in the application process. All the PER is in. There's a couple of minor revisions that we're having to work on that. That's the preliminary engineering report. The environmental report is done. Rural development has responded back some. There's just minor things that are being the gaps are being filled in on those reports, and also the financial feasibility report, and that was done by Blackburn Children's Segal. And that I know that rural development was pleased with that report. I don't think the final review of that has taken place from rural development yet. As far as so we're working through that, and we expect to be we assume and expect to be completed with that process by mid-May. This interest rate of 2.38% is good through June as far as rural development is concerned. So once we get the approval of the application from rural development, that's fixed for the life of the project. So if it takes us 5 years to build a school, that interest rate is fixed regardless of whether it changes in the future. So that's a good thing for us. As far as the architect's contract is concerned, that's the other thing that we have been working through, Ken Ross Architects, and we appreciate Ken and Jay working on this project more or less on the come, because we still are working through the contractual relationship with them. And it's not anything they've done. It's the fact that it's a little more complicated, because we do have a commitment in our agreement with the county and school board that there's going to be a construction advisor on it. And that's one of the reasons that Wayne Woods is representing Tommy Burleson, because we want to work with Tommy on this project. We're also doing a construction management / constructor, which essentially is the contractor. And the fact that we have an advisor, a construction manager that comes in, that's determined early in the project before the construction drawings are finished, that complicates it from the standpoint of some additional people that rural development has to feel okay about, and because they're the ones that are funding those expenses. And so they have been cooperative about it, but we've had to provide them with a bunch of detail. And my role in it as as the owner's representative. That gets factored in that in terms of, what I'm doing versus somebody else. So it's a little bit complicated. It's a setup that rural development hasn't dealt with before, and it's a little bit tedious to get through it. But we're probably 98% through. Would you say, Jim?
I think that's accurate. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're close. But anyway, we'd like to get Ken under contract. We haven't felt too guilty about not paying him, but we ought to pay him at some point.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can go 2 years and do that, but
So at any rate, that's where we are. We have spent a good bit of time. We have gone through contracts. We had to go through the lease agreement, the interlocal agreement with rural development in detail. And there's been attorneys that have been involved in that. And I couldn't tell you how many times we have gone through those contracts and tried to make any tweaks related to what rural development needed to have in there. And make sure that we didn't have to change things as far as Washington County is concerned. So it's been a very tedious process, and I certainly don't want to be an attorney.
yeah, thanks, Bob. I think it was kind of like negotiating with Culver there with Joe had on his team. It's a really good bunch. They made sure we crossed our T's and dotted our I's, and it's the federal government. They're even tough.
So does
Anybody
anybody
got
have
any
any?
comments about the Section 3 of the architect's contract or the application? Anybody want to make a comment about that? All right, very good. We'll move on down to something a little bit sexier, site factors. So first on there is, I'll let Bob, you and Jay, I'm sure we'll get into some of that, but really the site out there on Cherokee, to me, is the best one in Washington County for Jonesboro. It lays really well, and I think Bob will talk a little bit about it. We've already made some improvements there to North Cherokee and connecting to Smith Lane to kind of get to a future red light, and some good thoughts being put into that little circle right there. And we'll be doing more work out through towards the school site, when this gets underway. But Bob, you want to get into number 4?
Yeah, and I'll just do it briefly. I did send you some schematics. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that in terms of what we have already done. Part of the issue with school access is trying to get the car traffic, in particular, the car riders, spread out, especially when they're leaving the school. So we have worked on trying to provide alternatives, especially from the access to Jackson Boulevard or US 11E. And, once we're expecting that people will use those different ways to come off of 11E and get access to North Cherokee Street. We have completed what we call the connector in there. It'll end up most likely being Smith Lane that, comes in there below Amigos. That we have a traffic signal funded for that site that will be in place before the school opens. We're working with TDOT, and that's another tedious process, but it has been funded. And once that is in, we feel pretty good about the access going up to the top of the ridge and going over the ridge towards the school site. We did cut a couple feet off the top of that ridge. That's all we could take off safely, but in order to try to improve the site distance, especially since there's Ivy Trace subdivision is coming down at the top of the ridge. But we feel like we've improved that. We are doing a little bit of Todd Wood is working with us on a study from that point to the school site. We have discussed that roundabout, the traffic circle up there being on the school property. I think that's a pretty critical issue for us. And again, if we would like your input, in that, if you feel like there's a better alternative for that. But if you're on Tavern Hill Road from the county coming into Jonesboro, Tavern Hill's the county name, North Cherokee Street is in the town limits. So there is a second ridge over there. And if you're coming in towards 11E on Tavern Hill Road, you come over that ridge. Skyline Drive comes in just down the hill from the top of that ridge, and that has, there's not a whole lot of traffic on Skyline Drive at this point in time, but even with a little traffic, there's been some safety concerns, and especially with the speed of traffic that's coming across the ridge on Tavern Hill. So, you know, we felt like we needed to slow the traffic down. We needed to create a safer situation in there. That traffic circle, Skyline Drive would be extended into the traffic circle, which would mean Tavern Hill would have a stop sign, and they would just, whoever comes over the hill would have to stop and then turn left and go into the traffic signal to continue on North Cherokee Street towards 11E. We think that that's going to end up being a much safer intersection connection in there. And the other thing related to that, as I've pointed out, is that, you know, we know that a number of the school sites have their SRO, their safety officer directing traffic in the morning and after school. And we think that, you know, that doesn't really make sense in terms of the safety of the students and when the school is most vulnerable. You know, so there's only a certain number of people, you know, a certain number of staff you can have doing that kind of thing, you know, if you're on the law enforcement side. So the more that we can create the situation where cars don't have to stop and where we have an intersection where the traffic can keep going, there's less likely that there's going to be a need for there to be an officer at that site to allow people to get out. So we're still working on that, but that's a consideration that we're continuing to look at to try to have a smooth flow of traffic in and out of the school. So we'd be glad to have any kind of feedback if anybody has any ideas about, you know, how that might work better. And then I'll leave it on that. And then I can talk a little bit about car drop off if you want me to. Does anybody have any issues with what we intend to do or what we've already done as far as access from 11?
Bob, I think it looks good.
Okay.
Bob, I do got one question.
Okay.
And it's about the new intersection you've made there at Smith Lane and North Cherokee. And I'm not sure, I guess, how the buses are going to be able to maneuver around that, especially if they come from BP to the new school right there. Do you all feel there's enough room for the buses to be able to maneuver there?
That's a legitimate question. We have, be honest with you, we're looking at doing one of two things in that location. We probably will come back and retrofit the radius of that curb that's in that island because it is more of a 90-degree, and sort of after we did that, we thought, well, you know, if a bus does come up here, you know, are they going to have enough turbulence? And the other option is to make sure that if a bus does go out, that we have a wider section of the connector in there that they can, that would still allow them to turn and be in the through lane going up the hill. We're going to fix that. Let's put it the way. It's a good question, and it needs to be fixed.
All right. You're well ahead of it, so that's good.
Well, at least we realized it. You know, but it's nice if we did it right the first time. But
Well, we might have Dr. Flannery let us borrow a school bus and we'll just take it a drive around.
that's right.
Off on it.
Okay. But if there's not any other comments, and again, be glad to have them, then I'd like to go to the drop off because that's another important consideration in the school design. And Jay McCusker, if you have any comments on it, you can fill in. But we have looked at that with Todd Wood and tried to determine a way in which we could come up with the ability to have more kids get in and out of the cars at the same time. When we've talked to Brandon McKee and staff at the middle school and the elementary school, you know, what's going on now over there is like at the middle school, they'll have 4 rows of cars that come in there, but at the same time, there's not really, what they have to do, what Brandon said is they pretty much have to stand in front of the cars to keep them from pulling out and going around, you know, because the kids will get in and they get impatient. They don't want they don't want to wait. And so people try to pull around each other and this kind of thing. And he said it's kind of a kamikaze thing, but they literally stand in front of cars to make sure they don't move. And in the situation that we've tried to put together, like with this kind of peninsula layout, is that cars could split and come down either side of that covered concrete area, and then they would be able to turn and go along the school still in a covered area that would be along the at least that front of that adjoining area of the school. So I think that we end up determining that maybe we could get 17 vehicles on either side, which would be, and 34, 35 vehicles that would come in at the same time. We would have single lanes so that they couldn't pull out, so that if you're on the side where the driver is against the curb and you have a couple of students and one needs to go around the car to get in the passenger side, on the other side, that they don't have to worry about somebody coming around that way and running over them. So if you just have a single lane, and everybody has to move at the same time. If somebody wants to, well, this is one of the things that we would have to work out with the administration of the school, that if somebody, wants to go into the school or something like that, there's parking that would be very accessible close by, but if they get in that pickup or drop off lane, they have to they can't get out of their car. They have to stay there, and everybody moves at one time. When we went online and looked at different layouts of schools that were, I think, considered successful in that, and almost all of them moved all those cars at one time. Everybody comes in, everybody goes out, and then you fill in those slots again. You get the kids in the cars as fast as you can. There's a little outpost that's out there at the front of that peninsula that would, allow somebody with a phone or a radio to communicate back, here's the parents that are coming, whether that gets worked out in terms of a number, everybody's assigned a number, or however that gets worked out. But we feel like there is that layout provides the most opportunity for there to be a little more expedited process to get kids in and out of the school and get them dropped off. So we're glad to have any kind of input. We're looking forward to talking to some more principals about that. I did talk to Brandon McKee. He thought it looked great as far as he was concerned, but we still need to have some more conversation about that. I think it's the investment in that covered area in there. When you see parents come into the Jonesboro schools 2 hours in advance, who sit there, that can't be a good thing, So, I think anything that we can do that helps expedite that process is going to make the school more attractive to parents, because, you don't have to wait all day to get your kid. And it may even, increase the, whether or not it improves, the number of kids on the buses. That's the other thing. We have a separate bus access to that. And my understanding right now is that there's only about 7 buses that go in and out of the Jonesboro schools. So a large percentage of the people are bringing their kids to school. And to me, you have to accommodate that. If you look at stacking lanes, that's the other thing. We went all the way down along the ball fields with the ability to stack. And when you come back around, we actually have the capability of double stacking all the way down to where it loops back through the parking lot and double lane it through the parking lot. So, there's a good bit of stacking. We again need to take a look at whether there's any more needed. It is possible for us even to go down the Cherokee with a right turn.
Two is how much?
People there. So we're going to work. And Philip, we need to probably talk to you.
Okay.
Patrick, we need to talk to you probably more about that in terms of the number of vehicles that we have to accommodate. But
Hey, Bob, I think Philip might have had a comment or a question there.
okay, I'm sorry.
Just my comment was that the drop off and pickup lanes look great, but you're really, I think, are doing an excellent job with the stacking area. That's a big
4
problem.
million.
If we can park in the pickup and drop off lane, if you can have, say, 10 cars load or drop off at one time, then they shoot those 10 cars away, and then
I
they,
have questions, I'll call you back in.
and then, but with the stacking line, I don't know, Ken, do you have an idea of how many cars you can stack down the road beside the ball fields?
No, we haven't added those up, but it's quite a few. It's,
It
That's a-
would look to be more than we have in any other site we have in the system.
yes.
Yeah, Todd Wood did do a basic number edit. He couldn't really get a conclusion because really what happens is every building gets used a little bit differently. And it kind of ranges between 30 feet per car and 18 feet per car, which is the minimum. Usually it's in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but what we did find is that when you apply the same rules across the board to several of the existing schools, and then this site, we do in fact get significantly more cars compared to the other schools.
I really think it looks sufficient to me, but
Okay.
you know,
Well, we do, if you look at that upper lane, at the travel lane, access lane into the school that loops all, back around, you see that there's another lane that's in there that says reserved for future use. We could
Right. Right.
we could activate that on the front end, and we probably, need to consider going ahead and building that in. It may be better just to do that on the front end so that there is the option of a double, lane going, towards the school, even, on that upper end of the access road.
That's
Right.
one thing I like. I really like that concrete island there to have that dual drop offs. I think that makes a lot of sense. And we got really two areas that kids can be dropped off or picked up, versus right now at the middle school anyway, we just have that one large parking lot. Jay, I know this is all subject to change once we get a school design, but one little thing I was looking at down there by the gymnasium drop off where the you got the car drop off circling around and everything is kind of moving in one direction. I would
Right.
wonder if it wouldn't be better if we do have an entrance line coming down the right side of that. To me, you're going to have cars dropping off, flowing left to right, and then you're going to have some cars entering down. I'm not sure if we need that entrance in like that. It'd be better if everything flowed. When they came down, they turn right and flow left to right and just circle right back out without having that other lane coming in to meet them head on, basically.
But the extra loop.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think you're right that when we get the when we develop the actual building footprint, then that's going to significantly change some of the details like that, and we may have the space to do something a little bit more generous because when one of the few criticisms that I had of this site layout that we've had it for about 9 months now is in fact the issue that you pointed out. So I think we can certainly work out a better arrangement. And I'm hopeful that as we develop the building, we'll be able to actually just provide more space, which could pull that whole thing off a little bit, which will make it easier for everybody.
I think Jan had a question.
I do.
Two questions. One is that same lane that you're talking about going back and forth. Can that be, as we do now at the school, designated certain hours that it only flows one way?
We probably could. One of the things that we're considering, and when you look at the dynamic of this, that you're coming in, all the cars come in basically and shoot up the middle to hit to the peninsula. And then they kind of split in a heart formation. And then they both ends need to exit at some point. So what we're trying to do is avoid having any kind of vehicular crossing, that essentially it becomes one way all the way through. You're never actually having to cross traffic with other cars. So the only, go ahead.
The only other scenario, just as working car line, I have done that several times. On that right side that I'm looking at, you always have a situation, just because it's life, that a child does not hear their name called to go get in car line. So normally what we do at the elementary school is call the parent to go up to a designated spot as the other ones are flowing. That person is waiting for their child. So if it's been a miscommunication as far as either after school or, bus or car line, every once in a while, you're going to have a car that has to stop and that won't be flowing. So that little gym drop off area, could that be used as that designated spot in that area?
I think that's a reasonable expectation. That certainly handles the one side. I'm not necessarily sure how we would be able to handle the other side, because again, they specifically don't connect again. You would need as it's laid out now, you would need the parent to exit the right-hand loop, go back into the line and work their way back up to the front and go into the left-hand loop to be able to access that gym spot. So that's something to be worked out, but I think, reasonably, we could also just have a space designated, somewhere along the exit of the other side of the loop. So you basically have two of those spots, one on each leg. Might be the easiest.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because that has held up lines for 5 minutes or so if that car can't get out of the way.
Yeah. No, I think that's
Okay. Just
Very, very good comments. I think Joe's got a comment question.
Thanks, Chuck. So I'm looking at the original layout and 3 different alternates. Does this same stacking arrangement, travel arrangement, flow we're all talking about work the same with all 3? They look like they're a lot different to me.
They are. And, I was hoping to talk about the layouts a little bit later, but what we're really looking at is those layouts effectively just are in reaction to the programmatic concerns and talking with faculty and administration about some of the things that they might want to consider doing differently, having recently just done a school, and then also being able to look forward recently after. So we did spend a lot of time talking to them, and these layouts start to address some of those questions, but they would also need to be rectified to the site. So these are really just organizational schemes. They are not floor plans. So the way that they connect to the site for some are better than others, but we would need to certainly work out how that might be affected by the site in some of these schemes. So
I just would think we ought to not worry about the fine details of this car loading thing until we know what the footprint looks like.
I would agree with that. I think that, and we've just seen a couple of the layouts, even today. So I think that the important thing is that, is from a process standpoint, we're going through this kind of detail in order to we're focusing on the fact that the access, the parking, the drop off and pickup and all that are important considerations in the school and do impact the layout. And so we're just letting you know that we're trying to put that kind of detail in the thought process and seeking input into it so that it functions really well, and that at the end product, what we can say is we're going to dedicate this kind of effort to whatever the school layout is. We've got to make it work.
Yeah, whatever site we plan. Yeah, we probably don't need to, as Joe said, spend a ton of time on this, but really, I like the idea we're splitting up the drop off into pairs with an island that keeps kids safe on both sides, and we just need to carry that over to whatever site we put into play. This is kind of to me shows you where Jay is thinking. Him and Ken. It's and the research that Bob and all of you have put into it. I can see this working better than anything else we got. Brian, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, sorry, this is going on the details, but I wanted to point out basically what Jan pointed out there a minute ago about the kids that don't hear their name called. That happens, like she said, happens a lot, and it does back up stuff, and I think that'd be a good spot for that. And also just from an athletics side of things, for after practices and stuff, I'm assuming looking at that whole thing is covered, that all that concrete is covered all the way down through there. Is that what that's showing there right there in front of the gym?
We would imagine at least a significant portion of it would be.
Yeah, because I mean that just for drop off and pick up for practices, and then especially if you've been to Boones Creek for a basketball game, the drop off there, especially when they had the tournaments there last year, it was an absolute nightmare and it was gridlocked. And I think that right there, the way it's designed there would prevent that.
Yeah, I think we can all probably shake our heads on that like Laura is, but that's what we want to prevent. That's probably why all this initial research we've done, I think in the end result's going to play off to something that works in Jonesboro. Sometimes you can learn by other mistakes. And I think this shows us that the Ken Ross team and Bob and them are working in the right direction. I like the idea of having that spot set aside for the kid that didn't hear his name. That's one reason why we're having this discussion.
That's a good idea.
Taking that in there. All right, Bob, you want to move on to the next thing?
I had a question real quick.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mary Beth, I was curious where the location would be for the SRO officer in the morning and the afternoon. What area would that be located as far as traffic entering and exiting?
In the building. The idea is that the SRO officer is not needed outside the building and is always available to watch the building itself. That is the goal.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you hope it flows good enough to where you don't need anybody
Right.
else directing traffic.
Sure.
That would be the ideal thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's a very common practice for the SRO to be outside. So people do get used to that idea and kind of get, used to the idea that maybe that's where the SRO should be. But strategically, it's not. It's really kind of a stopgap measure that most schools are experiencing because, partially, a lot of schools are older, such as the building you're in now, where it simply wasn't designed for this sort of use. So, we're trying to look at it from a broader picture. How can we design for the way that it's going to be used in the future, not necessarily, making an assumption based on what we've done in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Good question there. Bob, you want to move on to the next thing?
So we're on the site factors.
I guess the access utilities, not much there other than, we do have gas service out there, which is really attractive for that site. We're not too far off 11 East. All that should be great.
Yeah.
And I'll let Jay can talk about the two-story thing. We think that that's something that's really important for, if you don't.
Sure. Yeah, and I do want to just jump back real briefly, just talk about the organization of the site and why it is the way it is. And we're looking at a few things, of course. The security of the site is important, and moving the cars as we've discussed. So you can see, the attention we've been trying to put there. But we also need to work with the existing site as it is. So one of the things, access to utilities tends to be on the western edge of the site. And if you're looking at sheet C1, which I believe is in the last section of the packet that Bob sent, I believe it's the first sheet of that last section. You can see that, we're basically setting the building as close to the western edge of the site as we can. And the reason for that is partially because that provides the best access. We have access to the most roads. We also have access to the most utilities from that site. And then finally, it also puts the building itself in a place of prominence. So that way, anybody who comes and goes from that site, or even by that site, knows that this is about the school, this is about the children, and we believe that's one of the things that sets us up for success. And then
It's also, hey Jay, let me just add, it's also less grading. That's the other thing.
Yes, and that was my next point, that what we need to do is work with the slope of the site. And of course, in Jonesboro, you all know, what the topography is like. There's hardly any flat land left. So we are dealing with that in a lot of different ways. The arrangement that you see on that site plan was designed as a split level. Having spoken to, to a lot of different people, we're now feeling that maybe doing a full 2-story might be the more appropriate use of that site, so we can make that building more compact still and allow us to do some different things and have room for expansion later on. And, you know, because one of the things that we do want to have is extra site amenities. There is additional grant applications in the future to provide some of these extra ball fields. You know, we want to have some certain programs occurring in the building itself that will interface with the site, such as an agricultural education program, and, you know, a number of other things that are, you know, really interactive with the site, so we can tie it in with the town and maximize what we can do with this 48 acres. So all of that kind of leads to what you see here. The two-story building that we have, really, basically, of course, the smaller footprint you have, the easier it is to locate a building on the site. And if we do it full two-story, what we're looking at doing is pushing it a little bit up the hill, so that way we can have a full first floor that would be traditional, and then the second floor would stack up above it as you would normally expect. The arrangement that you saw on this original site plan did the opposite, where the main level is the upper level, and as it slopes down the hill, it kind of carved out to create that lower level. And we're thinking we may not have to do that by going to full 2 stories. So it is making a pretty big impact. And of course, to the budget, if you do full 2 stories versus a split level, you're maximizing the dollar per, you know, you're maximizing what you get for your dollar per square foot.
There's also a big improvement security wise, because you've got that.
Yes.
That second floor is much more secure.
Yeah, getting upstairs from a building that has your building exits are always locked is always going to be a lot harder than just coming in a side door someplace. And the fewer exits and entrances that you have to monitor, the easier it is to keep the building secure, or certainly know about something if it arises. You can act on it much faster.
Hey,
So
Dr.
there's a lot of
Flannery,
benefit to this.
Yeah, but do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Flannery? Are you in tune with all that?
I don't believe I've got all the thoughts everybody else does, but I am looking at a true 2-story floor plan, and the security offered is incredible. You can stand in one place and see several hundred feet of hallway. So that's a really good idea.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that one, multi-level versus 2 stories? To me, it's whatever's the best for the school system. All right, carry on, Bob and Jay.
Okay. So the next would be building orientation. And as you look at the site and you look at that overall site plan, it's oriented on the page the way it is simply because that's the shape of the site matches the shape of the page. When you look at, so if you go to Google Maps and you look at the site, it's actually rotated by about 35 degrees or so. So north, you would go clockwise about 35 degrees to hit true north versus plan north on that site plan. And when you locate a building on a site, one of the things you want to try to do is get as close to cardinal points as you can with your north, south, east, and west. So the layouts that we've developed since this plan account for that much better than this kind of T-shaped or bent T-shaped plan that we initially started with. And when we get into the building plans, I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. But the idea is if you stay on the cardinal points, you can work to minimize your heat gain and loss in when it's warm and cool, which in Tennessee is critically important. And then also we can maximize the light coming in, which we can use to offset some of the energy costs we might have otherwise. So we can take advantage, by doing this and planning for it up front, we can take advantage of both of these factors, and it'll help keep operational costs lower than they might be otherwise if we hadn't thought about it in advance.
Let me make one comment in addition to that. I think I've given you all some information that Jay and I had a meeting with Jeff Dykes and Bright Ridge and their crew about the possibility of there being some solar work that was done on the site. What they indicated was that they're working on a plan to have an additional solar farm that they would end up dedicating a certain amount of that space per school in the county. Then they asked us if we would be willing to work with them, and we said, of course. And so what they would be doing with that is the kilowatts that would be produced from a section of that solar farm would be dedicated to reduce the cost of electricity within the school itself. And so, even during the summertime, when you're getting the most production of kilowatt hours, that those hours would be credited to the school and reduce the payment to Bright Ridge. They said they would much rather do it that way than to try to work on a plan where you're putting solar in the roof and this kind of thing.
Right.
The location of the school is in a really good site as far as sun access, but their comment was, we can make this a whole lot easier and not have to go through the additional cost of putting it on a building, by giving you credit. And so, we thought that was a brilliant idea, actually. And they did say they could put a couple units on the school for educational purposes that might get tied into the electrical circuit in the science room or something. And they could even put in boards that could go into the science room that would show all of the kilowatt usage or that's being generated and be able to use that as an educational tool with students in terms of how solar farms operate. So we felt like that was really a good conversation.
Bob, I'll just say that that concept was approved by the board yesterday, along with an LOI going out to Silicon Ranch, who would be the partner for Bright Ridge to develop that 100-acre site. 9 megawatt capacity would be the goal, and it would benefit Washington County school system, Johnson City school system, and ETSU shared. Could never get anywhere close to that many collectors on top of this building, or almost across the site. So you're exactly right about that. But part of that comes with a STEM program that's been developed by Silicon Ranch that would be available to the school system as well. And they are in agreement to locate some collectors on site, a meter, and some other components that would develop a science learning lab around the solar activity. So, and this would be a benefit for the school system at a guaranteed price for 30 years. So I think you'll be pleased when you see the results.
I think it's brilliant, Joe. It's great plan.
That's exciting to have that part of this whole plan to have something that other schools won't have, and that's going to be a savings in the long run for our school board.
Right. And in the long run, it is something that could potentially be, because you don't necessarily have to do anything to the building in order to take advantage of the program. Other schools in the county could take advantage of this in the future, depending on the proximity to the solar array and how much room is left on the array. The way it works is Bright Ridge will dedicate a portion of the array equal to the amount of roof area that the building has, with the idea being, as Bob mentioned, that rather than building the panels and paying for them to put them on your building, they're in the field in the large array. And so you get the same benefit. And it means that Bright Ridge has less maintenance headaches, and the school doesn't have to pay to maintain the panels or pay to put them on in the first place. So because of that, it means other buildings could be retrofitted fairly inexpensively to take advantage of this in the future as well.
Very good. Is anything, anybody else got any questions on that? If not, we can move into the next little area there.
I think Jody has a question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Quick question. So the way it was described just now, where the panels aren't put on the roof, they're part of the farm. It sounds like something that may have been a capital expense, but now it's a utilities expense because it's a cooperative agreement with Bright Ridge. We have that for our home right now. And so our agreement to buy solar power from Bright Ridge is our utilities cost. It was not a capital outlay for us. So which would it be for the school? A capital outlay or a utilities cost?
It would be a utilities cost. It's the same arrangement, but dedicated toward educational facilities.
Okay.
It's actually utilities cost reduction. Because we're currently across the system, we're paying about 11 cents per kW in Washington County, and this solar energy, these 3 megawatts of power, would be delivered at a guaranteed rate of 8 point something or other, and that's guaranteed not to change for 30 years. So it'll wind up being a credit to the system. So it'll work well.
And we do not have to consider it in the package that is the cost of the building, which is what I was asking. So
actually, I think it could be clarified just a little bit more, because the way it was described to us is that TVA has provided a credit back to the local distributors, and that allows them to make an investment in this kind of thing, so that the investment to create the farm and the connections and all that are being incurred by Bright Ridge, and not so that there's a way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, there is no capital expense associated with the school site in order to participate.
Zero cost.
Right. And so, at least in our informal meeting, that initial meeting, Jody, Bright Ridge was, we mentioned the educational aspects. They said that they would include installing the local array for the education portion. And I talked to them that what they would also be willing to do is create or at least provide the ability to do in-house monitoring, so that way a next level of this would be to provide what's kind of called like an energy dashboard that's located in a prominent location of the school, either in the main entrance or at the media center or someplace that's commonly accessed, that the kids could actually take a look and poke on a touch screen and look at what's going on with the energy use of the building at any given point. And that could, of course, be incorporated into science class curriculum to talk about how solar energy affects energy cost, and how much you might be able to generate on these panels.
But even that is zero cost to the school.
Right. All of that would be included. I think the one thing that they said, and you could probably negotiate the final terms, is that you just need to provide the computer that would actually sit there and act as the brains for this thing.
Hey, thanks, Todd Ganger, for doing that. We appreciate it. You're a good man.
I've been working hard on it.
Good board member.
Let's make sure we don't grow any trees around that. We need that good power. Is anything along Jay, you got anything else to address there in the site factor? Or do you want to move on down to the technology and those type things?
No, I think on the site, I think we've covered it pretty well. So I think we're ready to move on to the other stuff.
All right, Bob, anything in that point? Has anybody got anything else on that before we move on? All right, very good. Bob, let's go to number 5. Anything there for you?
Okay, just, we've sent you a good bit of information out in terms of what we have received in regards to security. That's a big issue. We're paying a great deal of attention to it. I would just say that I think we're trying to incorporate that Jay and Ken are trying to incorporate the measures, things that we have been told are important into the design scheme. Dr. Flannery mentioned the sight distance down hallways and stuff like that from the SRO office, or whether it's a kiosk or whatever it is. That's a pretty important component. The SRO needs to know what's going on. The technology within the school needs to go to the SRO officer as well. And we feel like as well as the administration office. And so there's things like that we feel like are really important and that we're trying to piece together. We also feel like because the school will ultimately end up in our city limits and the town of Jonesboro, is at least intends to be an important partner in what happens. We have the capability of getting to the school site probably as quickly as the county does, even though they're actually closer in terms of where the sheriff's department is. But their deputies are very often spread out, so it's important that we develop an overall plan with the sheriff's department. We feel like that if the system is designed in such a way that at least under certain circumstances that an alarm comes in to town hall, to the police department, dispatchers, that we can get there quickly. That there's already there's a coordinated plan together with law enforcement and, between the town and the sheriff's department in particular, as to, how we respond, who does what when they get there first and this kind of thing. So we're committed to work with the sheriff's department to develop that overall strategy. We're working, as we said, to try to keep the SRO in the building where they provide the most protection for the students. And I guess the other thing is in terms of layout and the technology involved in trying to determine where doors are open or not open and locked and this kind of thing. I think the technology issue, the way we feel about it, is also a really important consideration. And you have there's a lot of things that sort of impact security from the standpoint of how well your HVAC system works. If there's been an example of that would be there's some criticism about having two classrooms tied to the same thermostat, and one teacher's too hot and one teacher's too cold, and where it ends up, and you end up with one teacher who's too hot opening the door to the outside in order to get air in there. And so those kinds of things, it just makes sense for us to try to pay attention to those issues on the front end and see if they can be avoided. There's certainly, if a door is left open, is somebody getting a signal that it's open? And the technology needs to be able to be state of the art. And we've talked about, and I think our intention is, it's been a little bit hard with the virus, but our intention is try to get people together on the technology side, even get some outside consultation in to take a look at really what is the state of the art, what does that mean, and how can we set these classrooms up? The technology changes so fast. And you have so much more capability, year after year, that we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of what's out there and what's available. So, Jay, you have any other comments on that?
On security, just a couple things. The first is that one of the early concerns that we've heard from multiple sources is the door hardware to the classrooms themselves. And in a lot of schools, either the administration or sometimes the teachers themselves will retrofit the door hardware to try to, in their minds, improve the security. And there are certain things that we can do to eliminate that, because the last thing we want to do is trade one type of safety for another, because ultimately all we do then is open ourselves up to other liabilities. And these, they're called defeat devices. They're not really tested. They're not UL listed. They're not particularly, there's no real evidence that most or any of these are actually safe. So what we're looking at doing is looking at the building security as a whole, as a overall strategy. And we've already partnered with Allegion, who makes Schlage door hardware, and a number of high quality door hardware companies, that what we can do for the design committee, and it doesn't have to be right away, but we do have some demonstration sets in our offices for Ken Ross that once we're able to come in and meet, physically, we can bring those to the next meeting that we can. So that way you can try those out, see what how they work. And we could also do, Allegiant offered to conduct a seminar with the design committee to answer questions and essentially, talk about these issues in a larger context. So that way we could see how the door hardware and how some of these other things relate to the way that the overall building security works.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. That's no doubt that's important. One thing that we might need to start thinking about with this virus going around, it's hopefully not something that happens that often, but is there things we can do in this building to make it safer and make it more sanitary for the kids, maybe in the cafeteria or gymnasium, locker rooms, be thinking about those touch points that maybe we can eliminate to make that safer. Just, I guess in general, your schools, there are sometimes a lot of illnesses transmitted amongst each other in there. The little things that we're learning today, maybe we can put into play and prevent some of that in the future.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the, I've been looking into that in how school buildings are going to be affected by, by the virus. And one of the things that kind of stands out is, in order to have, for instance, eating lunch, it's one, besides recess, it's the big social event of the day. And, when you have all those kids, actively putting things in their mouth and, eating and drinking, you may end up with, having to run an extra lunch period in order to, keep them physically separated enough that you might be able to have, the right type of protection. So, that's one way, this might, the building might be affected. But I think, overall, beyond stuff like that, we don't really know enough yet about what the adequate protections are going to be. Clearly, as a country, we're struggling with that right now. So, those answers will be hopefully presented in the next few months, and we'll take advantage of everything that we can.
Yeah, it could be in the cafeteria, instead of having, I'm not sure what you got planned, instead of a long table that the kids sat in today, it could be, multiple round tables that are smaller groups. That way you break them up in some way.
Right. Yeah. And the answer is of course not immediately available. We'll have, I'm going to keep looking for any studies that I can. Obviously they haven't really looked at this yet because no one is up and running again. And even through the fall, that may not be the case. So it's hard to tell, but I certainly would hope to, again, grab whatever we can and incorporate it in time to, to make some use for it in this building.
We've got you out front. Maybe you can lead the way for the country and come up with some ideas.
We'll see.
As far as the cafeteria and CDC and related arts, I sent you all some information about conversation about classroom distribution allocation, and this sort of all falls into that category. We did get some good information from Caitlin Kite, the nutritionist for the school. It was very impressive, and talked about her vision and what a good cafeteria layout should be, and she talked about some of the things that in other schools that were done that could be done better. That I think her input's been very helpful, and we'll certainly be paying attention to that. But on the other, I think one of the issues for us at this point in time, and we had a conversation with Dr. Flannery about this, is that we really need to try to get more input into a more realistic approach to how classroom allocation works, and we sent out some information that actually came from Jay this morning about the number of classrooms that are needed, and we need to have more conversation about that, especially as it relates to the other spaces with related arts and that kind of thing. But Dr. Flannery talked about creating a panel having a number of, well, I say a number, but some key principles that he felt like would be really helpful come together along with a elementary supervisor. And I think we feel very positively about that. We think that would be really helpful to us to be able to sit down and work through the details of how these classrooms need to work with each other. And Philip, you would need to be, Philip Patrick, you need to be involved with that as well, because if you go into a new school, and we talked about Boones Creek and the fact that when we were talking to them about how there was a lot of redistribution of classroom space and stuff like that, on the very front end. And the only way that would seem to occur is that there's, you have a principal that comes in at a certain time, and they have, you talk about certain needs for that school and things that need to get changed around. And there's always going to be some of that changing. But we feel like that if we can get the right principal group together and get input, early on in the design process and the design phase itself, that we could come closer to having the school open in exactly the way that it needs to without having to change things around. So do you have any comment on that, Dr. Flannery? We appreciate your help on that.
Let me unmute here. I just circle back to what we talked about at our last meeting, that we can put together some really high quality, really veteran people to help steer that as the process moves along. I apologize. I was on the phone with our lawyer about one of our lawsuits, so I kind of lost track.
Okay, it's all right.
I'm back now. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we feel very positively about that, and we think that's going to be really helpful to us. And also talking with Jan, who's in the related arts in terms of the needs of what should happen at Jonesboro School. And so,
yes.
We're still working on that, but we feel like that we can move that along with some additional meetings in the very near future.
Yes.
I personally have spoken with some of the teachers at the middle school as the PTA president there, and they are very willing to give, their thoughts and ideas. Some of them have actually already sat down and shared some of those with me. I think who better to ask than those people that are actually in the building.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And they have some really good ideas. So I think that's definitely, Dr. Flannery, that's an excellent idea. We need to go straight to the source. The people that are in there working, that's
true.
Talking to for sure. And they were very excited to know that they could maybe have some input and to be heard as well. They were very excited to know that they could help as well.
We certainly intend to do that. And like I said, it becomes a little bit more difficult the way things are right now, but in terms of communication, at the same time, we'll figure out ways to do that. Jan Allen did great surveying of both the elementary and I think the middle school too. And so, we got some really good feedback that Jay has said he greatly appreciated. It was very helpful with the teachers already providing us with some of their concerns and what they felt like were priorities in terms of design. So we're certainly all about that and want that to continue.
Just make sure whenever we get that kind of feedback, it is valuable that if you speak to someone, write it down and then bring that back to the committee. And then of course, sounds like a good plan to, put together another group that, works day in, day out in those classrooms.
Right.
Sounds like we're on the right track there. Anybody got any comments about the classroom issues? Yep, Brian?
Yeah, I met with Mr. McKee one day earlier in the year, and met with about 20 of the middle school teachers. And I don't know how doable it is, but I know one of the biggest things that they were all begging for was a sink in every classroom. They were complaining about just day-to-day things, and then not being able to wash their hands and stuff like that. And then also another thing that a lot of the females talking about was the having more than one adult female bathroom, because they were talking about how they had to go from upstairs and down one side of the school to the other. That was kind of the two biggest things. I got a whole list of stuff that I can send to Jay, but that was two of the biggest things that we had the most discussion about.
It looked like Jan was agreeing with you on that, I believe. But yeah, just, hey, the idea of washing your hands in every room, that kind of makes sense with what we got going on now. So
Yeah, really.
things to explore.
Yeah, and
Anyone
that
else?
is really becoming the new standard for certainly elementary schools, less middle schools, but since it's combined, we assume that we're going to use the similar classroom prototype for each one, for all of those upper levels. But yeah, a lot of the things that we've gotten back, Brian, are, you know, essentially, and Jan could speak to this as well, that, you know, I took the survey and kind of grouped everything by category to try to make a little bit of an analysis on this. And it seemed that, you know, the top 5 main issues were designing the building for learning, you know, and general aesthetics concerns. And then and that was coupled with electric outlets and just availability to technology, having that ready to go. And then, of course, you know, security is right behind that. So, you know, just, you know, wanting to make sure that the building is as safe as possible. And then, you know, some really basic stuff, such as having, you know, good sized, fully enclosed classrooms, of course, coming from the building that, you know, they're in now. That certainly makes a lot of sense. And storage, sinks, and other classroom amenities are right there as well. So those are the main things that I think all of these, you know, every school should have those things, you know, in today's environment. And a lot of the other things, you know, there's certainly a lot of other responses, but, you know, when we get into some of those details, you know, we can be addressing some of these, you know, more individualized concerns as well.
It would be helpful, Brian, if you send any information, and this goes for anybody on the design team, you know, anytime you have information or, you know, have questions, you know, please send them to us, you know, so that we can look at it and address it and get back to you all.
Yeah, and the good thing there, you'll send those directly to Bob. You have his email, but I guess as a group, it's almost like we're deliberating. We can't send it as a group. Is that right, Jim? And they'll need to go, any ideas, just filter through Bob?
I think that's the best thing to do. And then Bob there's nothing wrong though with Bob taking an issue that's been brought to him by one of you all, putting some information together about it and getting it out to everybody. And so in that way, you all still have the information, but you're not deliberating toward a decision. So that's a way for each of you to hear the other's concerns without getting into that deliberation.
Yeah, very good. Jody, do you have something? I don't know if you raised your hand a little while ago or if you're swatting the flies. Okay. All right, thank you. Bob, just carry on.
Okay, we're going to slip down, I guess, the current status. We sent you that information out about classroom distribution, and just to let you know that we're working on that, and there are some interesting quirks related to that, and we'll be talking to school staff to try to nail that down and bring that back to you. The impact on security and the layout is a really big deal, and we've sort of talked about that. The information that I sort of did a section on security and tried to put a lot of that information together. You know, I think at this point in time, if you have any other ideas that we haven't looked at or addressed as far as the security concerns or what might be out there that you think we need to investigate in terms of improved security, please get that to us. Otherwise, we'll be factoring in the information we've already received, because we did talk quite a bit about it, into you know, Jay and Ken's design of the facility, especially once we get the classroom layouts kind of, I mean, it all has to get factored in there together. So we'll be paying attention to that, and then we'll start detailing out again how hardware and technology in the classroom or teacher fobs, you know, where that panic alarm, needs to, is that included? And I think we feel like that's going to be an important part of it. And then where does the signal go? Does it go to administration, or do we just, bite the bullet and say, okay, it needs to go to the county, to the sheriff's department, and to the town? We certainly can set it up to where we could get a signal in dispatch with the town of Jonesboro and have somebody out there. Usually our response time is just 2 or 3 minutes. So, we would be, that would be a priority to us if we got a signal that there was an issue. So, and we're used to false alarms. So, that's sort of just part of the issue. Do you have any other comments on that? Jay, are you still with us?
Yes.
Yeah, you just moved on the screen, so okay.
Oh, yeah, I had to make a change. My dog was barking. One of the, you've touched on, most of what's already there. A couple things that we learned, especially specifically related to related arts. One of the things that the related arts curriculum seems to work better if those classrooms are a little bit closer together, that you could plan more interdisciplinary curriculum. So we're going to try to accommodate that, although that, compared to things like security and, site access and those, it's a little bit lower on the list, but it's not out of mind. So we're going to do what we can there. CDC and essentially all of the special ed classrooms. The main request that we have there was essentially have them all located in a quieter portion of the building, particularly compared to Boones Creek, where they're right on the main corridor. So we're going to see what we can do to at least get them to a spot, and you'll see on the floor plans in a second how we're attempting to do that and consider square footage. And then we're trying to provide specific drop-offs, one for athletics, of course, and that would also be for buses. And then also, of course, the parent drop-off we discussed in depth already. And then having a CDC area drop-off, so that way, because that's more of a loading and unloading for some of those kids than it is simply getting into the car. So we're looking at all of that and trying to minimize the square foot as we do that. And you'll see how that affects the layouts that we have. The other thing related to the cafeteria is several people have mentioned maybe having some sort of an outdoor dining area. And I think, depending on the budget, we can either simply plan to include it or at least block out an area that it could be added in the future. And I think that's a pretty reasonable request, and I've seen that in several districts.
So I think that's we've sort of run to the end of the list. And so if you all feel like that there's something that we should be looking at pursuing that we haven't talked about, please let us know. I'll be glad to get your input on that if you have any concerns at this point in time. That's a question. Does anybody have anything that we need to focus on?
Anybody got anything they want to bring up?
I had some ideas about the related arts thing, but it looks like that's going to be further on down the line as far as details on that.
Yeah, just again, get with all of us, filter some of those good ideas to Bob, and then he'll accumulate those and get them out to us. That's one of the things we kind of just have to do with the whole opens meetings law is go through Bob. That's one of the attractive things about him being really sitting outside the design committee. I think it's going to work really so much better. Anyone else got any comments or questions? Joe, you got anything you want to close with?
Jay, is it possible when we're looking at these alternate layouts to sort of drop them on the site as you might have envisioned them going?
Yeah, that's the next step, actually, just to see how well that they integrate into the site. And when you,
I was just saying, I was just going to follow up with Joe. That would be great, so we could all see what the traffic pattern would be around each layout design, and then know how that would work. And then also each one of the three options that were just dropped today have different layouts for what I would call public use areas, which would be the gymnasium and the cafeteria. And some are better than others, but one may be better with a traffic pattern than the other one would. So see that in relation to one another, then maybe we could come up with a really good design there.
Yeah, I think Jay and I kind of talked about that a little bit before the meeting. One of those options is one of his favorites, but really it's so tentative, and I guess we haven't started paying them yet, so they might drop that down and lay that out and we start paying them. Philip, do you have something?
I do. Thinking back when we were planning for Ridgeview and Grandview and some of the folks that I talked to in our school system, one of the comments that I remember from some of our janitors was that most of our older schools did not have adequate janitorial closets. In the size school this is going to be, I just think that needs a point that the architect needs to understand. And also, when we built Ridgeview and Grandview, the first bleachers in the football field would only hold like 100 people. And we did a major change order. I think it was about $80,000 for each school to add the bleachers that are there now that would hold in excess of 500 people. So in thinking about this school, maybe 1,100 students in a few years, having adequate bleachers in those areas, I think would be great.
Sure. And quite honestly, when you look at some of these, special function areas, what we based the size of the blocks on is essentially what went into for Boones Creek. Again, looking at a similarly sized school would need similar capacity. So the gymnasium is basically set up in this layout to function and have bleachers very similar to the new Boones Creek School.
But I'm talking about the football field.
He's talking about outside.
Okay, outside. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, to me, when I look at today, Grandview's got a nice football facility down there, nice bleachers. I wouldn't think we have anything less than that. If not, we need to anything be a little bit better than that. That's what's at Grandview is pretty nice, and we certainly couldn't do any less than that.
I agree.
All right, go around the horn here. Todd, I think you had something.
I was just going to make a comment. I was just going to thank you and Bob and Ken Ross, everybody for reaching out to what I like to call the specialists in their areas. When you're trying to build this school, you all aren't just trying to build a school, and we appreciate that. You're trying to find the best way, the best things that are working good at the other schools, or even going outside of our system and seeing things. So I do appreciate you all getting the input and trying to do everything perfect. I know we're not going to make everybody happy, but at least you all are taking that extra effort and trying to find the input from the specialists, as I'd call them.
Yeah, I agree. That's one thing Bob would be really, really good at. And really our design committee here is pretty diverse. I think that was the start of it, but really there's a lot of knowledge beyond this design committee. We all got to go out there and bring it back into the committee, get it to Bob, and then put together the best product we can. We're fortunate to have a new school like Boones Creek out the street that's pretty new. So we kind of know that's the starting point, and I think we were able to improve it from that point. So appreciate that. Laura, you got anything? I'll go around the horn. Dr. Flannery, you have anything you want to close with?
Appreciate all the fine work that's been done. I keep circling back to that first floor plan. It's simplistic. It really works well. And what attracts me to it is that you can isolate the gym from the rest of the school easily. That's so important at 9 o'clock at night when you've got kids everywhere at a ball game and you don't want them wandering about. So I really like that first floor plan.
Is that the first of the most recent ones that was sent out, the block plans? Is that right, Jay?
Yes, it's simple L configuration. It offers a great deal of security. Easy to isolate one part of the building from the other. It just really works well for me.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Flynn. I think Jay likes that one as well. Jody, you got something for us? Good. All right, Brian, anything you want to close with?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I've been meaning to, I was gonna ask the Parks and Rec Board about this when we met, but it's constantly being canceled. The soccer fields, those like the small soccer fields, is the plan for Persimmon Ridge Soccer to use those?
We probably ain't got that far yet, but I would think that's the purpose of it, to take some of that pressure off of those, baseball, softball fields down there and get soccer to this new facility.
Do you have any idea what size those two small fields are going to be?
I don't know off the top of my head what that would be. I guess whatever regulation is for the age groups.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
I mean, there's supposed to be one main field, but
right.
We can have, Todd Wood has worked with our recreation staff on that. And so we can have the dimensions on that stuff detailed out.
Yeah, the athletic directors met with Bob and them, and they had some great ideas on some things too. So great to get their feedback. Mary Beth, you got anything? I see you peeking around the corner there.
I just want to thank everyone for their hard work, and communication is going to be the key. And I think the success to this school, and I think we're on the right track, and let's keep going.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Jim, do you have anything? Do we break any rules or anything, or were we safe?
No, sir. I think you're on the right track. I guess the one thing I would add is that to make sure that you all understand what's going to happen as far as Bob's role. Bob will be handling two main projects. There may be a little bit more, but we've about half of his salary is going to be funded from another group dealing with the other project. So that's a huge benefit to this project. But we're also, we couldn't have done, the town of Jonesboro could not have done this. And the mayor and I and Bob and I have all talked from the very beginning that without him, the town couldn't pull this off. So we both appreciate him, but also the way this is working out, it becomes an even bigger benefit to the school project.
Absolutely.
I
Ken?
appreciate that.
Yep. Ken, do you have anything you need to say? We appreciate
No.
what you've done for us so far too.
Well, you're quite welcome. I've been more listening than talking, making notes. Be sure we try to incorporate as many of these ideas in the planning stages as we can. And we appreciate all the input everyone's giving us.
Well, we appreciate y'all been listening as well as you have so far. We've got a long way to go. And Wayne, I see, are you there representing Tommy and everybody?
I am. I really don't have anything to add. I'm sure we'll have more input as the meetings progress.
Very good. I think we got a pretty good winning team right there. Bob?
Oh, no, I'm just going to say, Wayne, and, we have to do reality checks, on this thing throughout. And I think that's going to be an ongoing process for us. And we're looking forward to Burleson Construction being involved because, we need to be able to do cost containment, value engineering from the very beginning. We've got, the town of Jonesboro, as far as I know, is probably going to do this school thing one time. And, I don't think we're going to be in the school business, beyond Jonesboro School. So we just need to make sure it's right. And, that we're going to have a challenge with the budget. It's not a liberal budget, so we're going to have to really work at it. And, we hope that everybody will work with us to try to come up with the best solutions at the best price. And so we'll be working hard at that. And I assume you're going to ask Joe up there. We're greatly appreciative of the partnership with Washington County on this and the school board with you guys. We're very excited about being a partner. And thank you for letting us be involved.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Has anybody got anything else? Joe, you good? All right. Well, if not, I'll take a motion to adjourn this meeting if anybody's got one.
Motion.
All right, we got the motion. Take a second.
Second.
All right. Our next meeting is the last Wednesday of May. That looks like May 27th, I think. Yep. 4 o'clock. If anybody's got any issues, get with Bob on that. But if there's anything comes up in between, we'll hit you with an email on it. But again, it's exciting, and we're going to keep moving this thing forward. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good time.